I've seen a reduction in win rate from my own database and also from the students I work with. And I'm thinking, wow, am I getting worse at the game? Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. My name's Gareth James, and today we're going to be talking about win rates in MTTs, and I'm going to give you 6 tips to better understand and improve your win rate. So first of all then, what is win rate? Well, win rate is measured in big blinds per 100 hands, which means it's a measurement of how much you're winning for every 100 hands you play. And it's normally used for cash games, but we can definitely use it for MTTs as well. Although ROI is more commonly used. If you speak to most tournament players, if you ask them what their win rate is in tournaments, they're going to say, oh, it's 30% ROI or something like that. Whereas in cash, they would talk about how many big blinds they're winning per 100 hands. Now, we can definitely use big blinds per 100 in tournaments, and I'm going to explain now why I think it's really, really important. So basically, win rate is important because it gives you an idea of how fast you're winning. ROI might not be the best measurement in the short term. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, big blinds per 100 gives you an idea of how fast you're winning, and it also shows you where to focus your attention. And here is a breakdown of a player's win rate, and you can see that they're winning in the game. They're winning 6 big blinds per 100, and you can see that they're winning a lot more from the button than they are from EP, and they're losing in the blinds. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. So what about ROI? Why are we not talking about ROI when it comes to tournaments? So first of all, ROI is return on investment. And when I talk about, for example, having a 30% ROI, it means for example, every $100 that I put into playing a tournament, I expect to win $30, and that's $30 profit. So it's a pretty good measurement of whether you're winning in the game. But the problem is it's heavily skewed by short-term results, especially if you're playing big field tournaments. If you have a big win, the individual ROI for that tournament could be as big as like 10,000%, right? And that's going to skew your results in the short term. You're going to look like you're a really, really big winner in those games. But similarly, if you don't have a result in the short term, you're going to look like you're a big loser in the game as well. So sometimes ROI is not necessarily the best way to measure your performance in tournaments. And what we need to do is actually to use a combination of ROI and win rate, or ROI and big blind per 100, because what we can do is actually use that to identify tournament-based leaks. So for example, let's say that you have a pretty big win rate. Let's say you're winning 10 big blinds per 100 in MTTs, but you're losing money. Like you've got a minus 8% ROI or something like that. There's lots of things that could be going on here. Now, you could just be running bad when it matters most, but there could also be some tournament-specific leaks. For example, like you're not playing final tables well enough. There could be that you're really good at taking the highest chip EV line, but you're not very good at taking the highest dollar EV line. And so when it comes to playing tournaments, we know that there comes a point when dollar EV and ICM is really, really important. So if you're still playing in terms of chip EV, then you're actually probably losing real money now. So yeah, okay, your win rate's going to be looking good, but your ROI is going to be negative, and that's not what we want when we play tournaments. So it can be really, really challenging to know if a player is a winning player in the games, especially in the short term. Just because they have a positive ROI or even a positive win rate doesn't necessarily mean that that data is really, really reliable. And so I think it's really important to understand variance. And especially when you play big field tournaments, the variance is ridiculously high, and it's going to skew the data massively. Now, obviously, the way to overcome variance is to play more tournaments, play more hands. So when it comes to big blinds per 100, the more hands that you play, the more likely it is that that's going to be a true representation of how much you're winning in that game for chips, right? And remember, when it comes to tournaments, we want to be thinking in terms of dollar EV as well. But when it comes to ROI, you will need several thousand games, for example, to show you whether or not you're winning in those games. And there is a chance, of course, that your ROI is a lot higher than your expectation, just because you've played, a decent sample. Let's say you've played 5,000 games. Your ROI can still be a lot higher than your expectation, and that's just down to variance. You could put it into the tournament variance calculator on a site like it was formerly called PokerDope, but I think it's called primedope.com now. Have a look in there and put in, give yourself a positive ROI and play 5,000 games and choose a big field tournament, over 1,000 players, for example, where the variance is going to be a lot higher. And you'll see that there's a massive sort of disparity, a massive sort of gap between the bottom end and the top end, and then you'll probably fall somewhere in between. So yeah, there are bound to be players who have a positive ROI but are still losing because of the variance of tournaments. So this is why I've sort of wanted to kind of stress that ROI is not always a good measurement. In the massively long term, it obviously will be. You know, if you're losing in the game over hundreds of thousands of tournaments, then you're probably, you know, a losing player. But in the short term, ROI is going to be heavily skewed by your short-term results. Okay, so I'm sure the reason why you clicked on this video was to look at, okay, what kind of win rates can I possibly achieve? And what I've done here is I've taken the win rate straight from Monka Solver, from the pre-flop solutions. Monka has this great thing where it shows you what the win rates are for each position. So for example, 100 big blinds, you can see our expectation is to win 14.4 big blinds per 100. And then from the button, we're winning 39.1. And then we have a negative expectation, a negative win rate from the small blind and the big blind. So you might be looking at this and thinking, wow, the solver can't even win money from the blinds. No wonder when I look at my own stats, I can't win money from the blinds either. Now, some players will be making more money than this. The key thing I wanted to just really stress here is this is the solver playing against itself, right? And this is just pre-flop, and obviously it does factor in post-flop play. But these are pre-flop solutions, so these are the win rates that it believes that are achievable if the solver plays against itself. Now, we don't play against solvers, hopefully. We're not playing against bots, hopefully. But what you'll realize is, or what you'll be able to do is actually achieve win rates higher than this. So if we, you know, go back to the screenshot of the player right at the start where I gave the breakdown of their win rate, you can see that they're not anywhere close to these numbers, right? So you can definitely achieve much higher numbers. I think they actually did outperform either the small blind or the big blind. I can't remember exactly now, but it looks like, you know, win rates in the other positions not quite as good. Why do we have a negative win rate in the blinds? Well, let's just think about this for a moment. If you folded every time you're in the small blind, you would lose 50 big blinds per 100. So to make minus 12.9 is actually pretty good, right? And the same thing goes for the big blind. If you folded every time you're in the big blind, you would lose 100 big blinds per 100. So to make minus 35.1, again, really, really good. So let's have a look at 80 big blinds as well. Similar thing going on. You're going to be losing in the blinds, and you're going to be making more the closer you get to the button. So the button's always going to be making much more than early position. Let's have a look at 60 and 50 big blinds here as well. Exactly the same pattern going on. And by all means, you know, pause the video if you want to run filters in your own database to compare your win rates for all of these positions against the solver, then give you a good idea of where you need to focus your attention. 40 and 30 then, exactly the same pattern, winning more from the button than from EP, and then still losing in the blinds. And then finally, 20 bigs and 15 bigs, exactly the same thing is going on. Okay, so let's talk about what can actually affect your win rate. Now, in the last, I would say, year or two, I've seen a reduction in win rate for my own database and also from the students I work with. And I'm thinking, wow, am I getting worse at the game? Are my students getting worse? But there's one thing that's different in the last 2 years, maybe it's longer than that, but basically in the last 1 or 2 years, we're seeing a lot more of a particular type of tournament where it actually encourages you to take minus EV lines in order to make a profitable play. And what are those tournaments? Of course, they are PKOs and bounty builders. And if you're seeing in the last couple of years your win rate reduced by a little bit, I'm not saying for sure that it's down to PKOs and bounty builders. It might be that you're just being left behind a little bit, but I think that this will be a definite effect, and this is definitely affecting your win rate. If you've never played PKOs or bounty builders before, the reason why I said it, you know, encourages you to actually take minus EV lines is the fact that you're actually getting a discount because you're encouraged to take these minus EV lines in order to win a bounty. You know, you win that bounty straight away. So what that means is if you play a lot of bounty tournaments, and you know, if you look at most of the schedules across PokerStars, GG, Party, all the other sites as well, there are other sites available, then what you'll see is that, you know, I would say more than 50% of the tournaments now are PKOs or bounty builders. So that has to be having an effect on your win rate. Second point then is playing against better players. The key to winning in poker is to play against players who are worse than you, and you've got to make sure that you have an edge. If you're playing against 8 players who are worse than you, you're going to win. If you're playing against 8 players that are better than you, you're going to lose. It's as simple as that. So it's really important that you're playing against weaker players, weaker opposition. And yeah, if you're choosing to play too high and playing against better players, then this is definitely going to be affecting your win rate. Next point then is about misapplying theory and or not exploiting the population. So what I'm saying here, I'm going to give you some tips in a moment to how to improve your win rate. And one of them is going to be talking about GTO fundamentals and then moving on to exploits. But I think what happens is the more you get into studying poker and the more you learn, you learn the theory, but then completely forget about the exploits. So what ends up happening is you end up losing a lot of money in river decisions, for example, where your opponent just doesn't have enough bluffs and you end up just making these crying calls all the time and not winning enough of the time for the call to be profitable. Now, it's obviously a really, really big statement, but very often in low stakes and mid stakes MTTs, triple barrels tend to be more weighted towards value rather than bluffs. So what this means is that when you're learning the theory, it's really important to understand the why, right? So that you can actually start exploiting the population as well. If you're using apps, for example, like DTO and other apps like that, then you might get to a point when your loss in EV is actually really, really low and you're thinking, wow, this is great. And then you start to apply what you're learning with those apps and all of a sudden you just start hemorrhaging money. And so I think these apps are fantastic, and I think they really help you learn. And you can also use something like Simple GTO Trainer. But I think that you've got to be really, really careful especially when it comes to river decisions, because these are the ones that are really going to start hurting your win rate. And you're supposed to bluff catch at the right frequency, right, on the river, and yet if your opponent doesn't find enough bluffs, then a lot of your calls that are, maybe just barely profitable, or maybe they're indifferent between, or you're indifferent between calling and folding. If they don't have enough bluffs, then all of a sudden your indifferent call where for example, I've got a call here 46% of the time, suddenly becomes a losing call and you should fold 100% of the time. And the final point here is just playing poorly, right? You might just be not very good or not good enough yet. And we don't want to sort of forget the fact that in poker, we should always be working on our game, looking to improve. And the biggest thing that can affect your win rate is actually not playing very well. So I think it's really important to address that, and let's make sure that we are honest with ourselves and we're actually, looking at it and thinking, do you know what? Like, maybe I'm not playing these hands well, rather than doing what, many poker players do, and maybe even I do it as well. You probably do it, massively overestimating your own ability. So be a bit more humble and focus on things that will help you improve your game. Okay, so how do you improve your win rate? Here's a few tips then. The first one is understand and learn the tournament poker fundamentals. I put in brackets GTO there, and I think this is really, really important. The fundamentals will just set you up for a great career in tournament poker. The way that we can learn those fundamentals is by learning what the solvers are doing and then using that information to then make more money by exploiting the population and specific players. So that's the next point I wanted to talk about. But you've got to have the fundamentals down first and understand the GTO principles in order to be able to exploit. Now, we could go and have a debate here about, GTO or exploit, but they're both, you need to do both. You can't just be like, oh, I'm GTO or I'm exploit, and ignore the other one. You can't exploit unless you know what you're supposed to do or what your opponent's supposed to be doing. How do you know that they're making a massive mistake unless you know what the GTO fundamental line looks like? You don't. So the key thing here then is to focus on the fundamentals, get the fundamentals really, really strong in your game, really solid, and then look to exploit the population and specific players to make even more money. Now, when I'm talking about money in this sense, I'm obviously talking about chips because we're talking about big blinds per 100. But obviously, there are certain things that we can learn through this, the tournament poker fundamentals when it comes to ICM and playing bubbles and final tables and stuff like that. Finally then, you've got to play in tournaments where you have an edge. Game selection is just really, really important. If you are finding that your win rate is lower than you want it to be, then there's a chance that you're playing in games that are too high or too tough. And I think it's really, really important to find games that are a lot softer and where you have an edge. Like I said before, if you play against 8 players that are worse than you, you're going to win. If you play against 8 players that are better than you, you're going to lose. Which one do you want? So in conclusion then, win rate is a really important figure to understand, and together with ROI, it can help you identify leaks in your own game, show you where to focus your attention. So for example, if you're not winning very much from the button, and you should be, then I would focus on a lot of button fundamentals. For example, like making sure that you're opening enough hands from the button. You know, are you opening close to 50% or even more in some spots? Are you c-betting the right kind of boards? You know, in low to mid stakes MTTs, you can very much c-bet in position very, very frequently, and this is going to lead to, you know, a big boost in your win rate. But it's really important that you identify the leaks and then make a plan to fix them. So you can definitely improve your win rate just using some of the ideas from this video. And as I said, identify the leaks, make a plan to fix them, and then you will see a boost in your win rate for sure. Also remember that some tournament formats are actually going to affect your win rate and actually lower your win rate. So if you are playing PKOs and bounty builders, then just be aware of that. What you can do is filter these tournaments out if you want to, so that you can have a better idea about what your win rate looks like in non-PKO or bounty builder format tournaments. And finally, focus on the things that you can control. You can get better at this game. And if you want to take your game further, I do have a course. I'll put the link down below. But the key thing I want you to take from this video is there are things that can help you improve your win rate. So play in games that are soft, play in games that you have an edge. Don't play against players that are better than you. Don't play too high. You know, don't let your ego get in the way. But also make sure you're focusing on the things you can control away from the table, which is how much study you're doing, and make sure you are identifying your leaks, making a plan to fix them, and you'll definitely start to see a boost in your win rate. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. Until next time, guys, take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.